I.
Throughout the time that Thierry Tilly spent with the Vidrines, he shared a lot about himself. However, most of what he shared about his past was just straight up lies. He said that his mother was barely more than a child when she had him at the age of 14, that she would have been a championship figure skater if he hadn't been born. He claimed that his father was a naval frogman who worked in the special services for the Ministry of Defense. He said that at one time he was a semi-pro tennis player, as well as a semi-pro footballer who almost played for Marseille as a goalkeeper. He claimed that he was also a lawyer, a pilot, a professional skier, and that he parachuted from a military plane when he was only 12 years old. He claimed that he was ambidextrous and could play tennis with both hands. He bragged that he could run 1,000 meters in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. He claimed that he knew the former French president François Mitterrand personally, as well as celebrities such as Brigitte Bardot, Pierre Richard, Sophie Marceau, and Lillian Bettencourt. He also said that he was related to the Queen of England. According to him, he was a descendant of the Habsburgs family, which is of Austro-Hungarian nobility, a strange claim to make since the Habsburgs are notorious for their royal inbreeding. His personal account of his schooling was even more convoluted. He said that after he studied law, he received advanced placement into a school specializing in intelligence training for diplomats and soldiers. He claimed that he then gained a PhD in marketing and a specialist degree in the detection of counterfeit money. He said that he had a master's degree in property management and administration, as well as a degree in international economy. Then he claimed that he studied what he described as intelligence concerning codes of investment in relation to corruption. Of course, all of these claims were lies. No records exist backing up anything he said. When a judge questioned him years later in court, he attempted to confuse the discussion by listing a rapid succession of dates, names, and places. When pressed further, he simply claimed that he could prove it. Then he claimed that his records were seized by Scotland Yard due to matters of national security. Okay, so, now that we went through his claims, here's the real story of who Thierry Tilly actually is. Thierry Tilly was born on March 29, 1964. He was a somewhat frail and sickly child who experienced convulsions, as well as problems with his eyesight, which had to be operated on. He grew up in a modest home. His father was a driver and his mother was a nurse. Although Thierry Tilly was endowed with a remarkable memory and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of historical facts and dates, he was never a gifted student. After high school, he applied for entry into a naval college, but his application was rejected. Thierry Tilly lived with his parents until he was 30. During his 30s, he developed an interest in business. However, all of his ventures failed spectacularly. This was not because Tilly was incompetent, but rather it was because he was a crook. The little that's known about Thierry Tilly's past scams all involve one man, a lawyer named Vincent David. Yes, the very same Vincent David who first introduced Ghislaine to Tilly. The two met during the mid-1980s, and throughout the following years they remained close friends. Vincent David recalled in court that, quote, "At first I found him congenial. He asked me to sort out various accounts which it turned out could only be done through their liquidation. Without this, the company concerned would have had to close. I discovered later on that he won people's trust, got them to sign contracts, and then took matters no further. He wanted to dispose of a considerable number of companies whose articles of association remained vague. Initially, Vincent David wanted to help Tilly, so he provided him with legal advice free of charge. Although he wasn't entirely sure what exactly it was that Tilly did for work, he believed that Tilly was brilliant and had a lot of potential. Therefore, it wasn't long before Tilly was able to rope Vincent into a scheme. Tilly claimed to be developing several luxury apartments in the Alps, and he wanted Vincent David to jump on board as an investor and as his legal representation. Tilly said he couldn't pay him, but instead he promised to give him keys to one of his apartment units once construction was done. Tilly also promised Vincent David a large return on his investment. The deal eventually collapsed, and Vincent David found himself stuck with an 18-month bill for unpaid rent of an apartment which Tilly was staying in. Vincent David later said in court that he still trusted Tilly even after that, since he saw him as a young man who was trying to take his first steps into the world of business. Not too long after that, Vincent David introduced Tilly to the heir of a champagne company named Hughes Gosset. Then Tilly defrauded the heir, who for some reason never lodged a complaint. Whether Vincent David knew that Tilly had scammed Hughes Gosset is unknown. Regardless, Vincent David continued to associate with Tilly. Vincent David even let him stay at his home for some time before his wife kicked him out after Tilly had traveled to Nice in order to make a list of property belonging to her family. In court, Vincent David said of his wife, quote, "She realized before I did that his objective was to get his claws into rich people and to live off of their capital. He is brilliant, there's no question about that, but he employs his intellectual faculties in a scandalous manner." He manages to maneuver people into a position of veritable intellectual subjection. Last time I talked about how Thierry Tilly slowly won the Vadrines' trust and then told them that they were the targets of a plot. What I left out in that video was that not every member of the family fell for his lies. For example, while the rest of the family trusted Tilly, Ghislaine's husband Jean Marchand did not. Jean Marchand, who was a financial journalist for well-known papers in France, was also a highly educated and worldly man. At one point, he was the youngest editor-in-chief of a newspaper in France. In 1997, he launched a magazine, but it ultimately went bankrupt. Jean Marchand first met Tilly at an annual dinner for Ghislaine's school in the year 2000. After they spoke, Ghislaine asked her husband what she thought of him. Foolish was the word he used to describe Thierry Tilly, who had wasted no time before telling him that he was a secret agent. Jean tried to warn his wife that Tilly was a fraud, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. Ghislaine was already under Tilly's spell and was far too gone to be reasoned with. Over the next few months, Jean Marchand continued to have run-ins with Tilly. Jean noticed that Tilly frequently borrowed money from people, but never seemed to pay for his own expenses. He recalled how Tilly told him that his briefcase would explode if someone other than himself ever touched it, a statement which Jean found to be an unbelievably silly bit of fiction. One night, Jean stormed out during the middle of dinner, exasperated by Tilly's boasts and lies. Years later, he told a journalist, quote, "Tilly said he belonged to an extraordinary network, that he knew everyone who was anyone, and he mentioned some kind of very mysterious supranational agency that was above NATO and the UN. He suggested that this thing was all-powerful and he belonged to it, and that therefore, he could do everything he wanted. He was so bizarre that I couldn't take him seriously, and I distrusted him." Because of Jean's distrust, Tilly began to make a habit of regularly demonizing him, telling Ghislaine that he had proof that Jean was cheating on her and was planning to leave their marriage. Then he added that he had evidence that Jean was also part of the Judeo-Masonic plot targeting her. Although she was dissatisfied with her marriage to Jean, she still loved him deeply. So Tilly knew he had to gradually chip away at their bond over time, and that he did. It took a little over a year, but she started to believe that her husband, Jean Marchand, was in league with their enemies and that her parents-in-law were as well. But Tilly didn't stop just there. He also claimed that her older sister Anne, who died of a brain tumor in 1997, was instead murdered by her brother-in-law, who was also part of the sect. Going forward, Tilly continued to play the role of a secret agent, telling Ghislaine that his job at the school was only part of his cover. Over time, he added in more details, such as that there were other agents close by who were working with him. Sometimes he would make a show of nodding at a random passerby, and then claim that they were part of his team, telling her that they were all on the same mission. Whenever an issue would arise for her or the school, Tilly would find a way to blame it on unseen enemies. Tilly warned her that Freemasons wanted to hurt her, her family, and that she must be vigilant, implying that they are everywhere, even within the inner workings of the school. Soon it wasn't only strangers that she had to be wary of, but also her colleagues, family, friends, and even her husband. Tilly explained that part of his mission duties was making McCarthy-esque lists of Jews and Freemasons. Ironically, Tilly himself had been a member of the Freemasons before being removed for embezzlement. Then he started claiming that through his sources, he learned that the school was being eyed by a Masonic group since it was prime real estate. He warned her that in order to acquire it, they would use nefarious and deadly tactics. She became increasingly more paranoid of the enemies which Tilly spoke of. She lost 12 kilos and began to wear thick, dark sunglasses indoors and out. She believed people were following her wherever she went. She warned faculty members to watch out for Freemasons. A staff member at the school told Vanity Fair, quote, "We could not have heat in this school because the fuel tank was empty. When I told Ghislaine that it had to be filled, she replied that the Jews and Freemasons had siphoned it and that it was a Judeo-Masonic plot." At Tilly's behest, Ghislaine renovated the groundskeeper's quarters at the school for him to live in and hired a guard to patrol the premises with a Rottweiler on a leash. She did this because she believed that Tilly needed an inconspicuous location to reside in due to his life as a secret agent. Following that, Tilly convinced Ghislaine to set up surveillance cameras at the school. She did this after he told her that his guard was overwhelmed with having to protect them from Freemasons and Rosicrucians by himself. By mid-2001, the school officially shut down. It was put into liquidation with a heavy liability and was in the process of declaring itself bankrupt. However, Tilly told Ghislaine that the shutdown was only a temporary measure, and Ghislaine herself wasn't very concerned. She genuinely believed that she didn't have to worry because she was under the protection of Tilly's supranational organization, which the French government and courts were subordinate to. Additionally, she believed that Freemasons wanted to kill her family, which she saw as a more pressing concern than her failed school. What strengthened Tilly's claims that they were the target of a plot was that suddenly a string of mishaps began to plague the family. Ghislaine's son Francois was beaten up in the subway. 4 of their cars were stolen in quick succession. Charles Henri's gynecology office was flooded because of a gutter blocked by a blouse. Christine's car randomly caught fire at a toll booth. Then a farm trailer and some seed was stolen from one of their sheds. Tilly told them that the trailer would reappear within a week, and just like he said, it did. Without any intervention on their part, Christine's smallholders account was credited with a reimbursement of the cost of the stolen seed. When 2 of their cows died after swallowing barbed wire, even the vet who examined the animals was baffled. Following that, 2/3 of their estate was threatened by a plan for a reservoir, designed for the irrigation of crops. Tilly promised them that he would stop it from happening. And although the plan had been fiercely contested by the inhabitants throughout the region, Tilly took sole credit for stopping it. Whether many of these misfortunes were manufactured by Tilly himself remains unknown. Soon Tilly persuaded them to stop paying their taxes. He told them to send the money they owed to the fisc directly to him so he could do so on their behalf. Of course, he never did. Tilly encouraged other members of the family to beef up their security as well. He visited Philippe's home and installed security cameras and reinforced shutters. There he made acquaintance with Philippe's partner Bridget and warned her that her ex-husband was a Freemason and that she was being watched. Bridget fully believed him when he told her that her ex-husband wanted to seize her, lock her up, throw her into a psychiatric hospital, and then empty her bank accounts. Tilly then gave her what he called an encrypted phone, and she transferred 115,000 euros to him for protection. Philippe's partner Bridget became convinced that all strangers were potential kidnappers. She saw random inconsequential things such as seeing a suspicious white car make an abrupt turn, or seeing a man peek over his newspaper while she passed, as a sign that she was being followed. Terrified, she soon became reluctant to even leave her house. By this point, Thierry Tilly had successfully reprogrammed the family into a cult. The paranoia and fear which he instilled in them had changed them from an ordinary group of people into puppets who would do anything he told them to, believing that he was the only one that could keep them safe. Thus what followed was the family successively banishing loved ones from their lives, while further isolating themselves from the rest of the world. One amazing thing about this story is that by March of 2001, Thierry Tilly fled France and moved to England indefinitely in order to escape from a 1-year sentence for fraudulent bankruptcy. Before leaving, he told Ghislaine that he was relocating to England for his mission duties. Incredibly, his influence over the family continued. Going forward, their main form of communication with him was only by phone and email. And as unbelievable as it sounds, he was still able to manipulate them, even though he was in a different country. Such was the case during September of 2001, when Tilly vetted the guest list for 2 back-to-back events that the family were hosting: Ghislaine's daughter's wedding and Ghislaine's yearly music festival. During the wedding between her daughter Guillemette and a young pianist from Nice named Sebastian, certain relatives were shunned and some were even barred from entry. Ghislaine's widowed brother-in-law and his children were included on Tilly's list of those who were prohibited from attending the wedding. Ghislaine even called her brother-in-law herself to inform him that he would not be invited because she had information that he was secretly a Freemason. Ghislaine's husband, Jean Marchand, and his parents also made it onto Tilly's list of potential enemies. Although they still attended Guillemotte's wedding, they were purposely given the cold shoulder by the Vidrines. In his book Diabolique, co-written by Ghislaine, Jean Marchand writes that he felt completely isolated from his family during the wedding, even while walking his own daughter down the aisle. A week later, during Ghislaine's annual music festival, Tilly imposed an even stricter control over the guest list than at the wedding. Tilly told them to treat certain family members with open hostility, and the festival ended disastrously when Charles Henri got into a fistfight with one such family member. Going forward, it didn't matter who Tilly accused of being a Freemason. Old friends, husbands, wives, children. If he said they were one, well then that was that. Case in point, shortly after the music festival, the Vidrines turned on Ghislaine's husband Jean Marchand and ousted him from their lives. Months prior to his removal from the family, Jean Marchand had asked Ghislaine for a technical divorce in order to protect their property. His reasoning was that he wanted to avoid both of them being involved in the inevitable bankruptcy of Ghislaine's school. He also wanted to save their remaining property, but had no intention of leaving Ghislaine. However, due to Tilly's past claims that Jean was a serial cheater who was planning to leave her for another woman and settle in the United States, Ghislaine mistook Jean's request of a technical divorce for a legitimate one, and Tilly used their miscommunication to ramp up his accusations against Jean. Jean Marchand's banishment from the family took place on September 7th of 2001. It all began after Ghislaine found 2 items on her lawn. One was an oddly placed bouquet of flowers, and the other was a single glove. It's a testament to how paranoid they were by this point that finding these innocuous items put both Ghislaine and her brother Philippe into a state of absolute panic. After finding the flowers in the glove, Ghislaine immediately called Tilly in London. As mentioned earlier, Tilly didn't like Jean Marchand, especially since he couldn't control him. Prior to this, he had spent over a year demonizing Jean while speaking to Ghislaine and the rest of the family. Hence, he used the situation to spin an elaborate story so he could finally get rid of Jean Marchand. On the phone, Tilly told Ghislaine, quote, "These are the evil signs of the network to which Jean belongs. The glove means that they're going to cut off your hand, and the bouquet of flowers means that you are near death. So listen to me. You'll pick them up and put them in a bag, and then you'll throw them at Jean's feet after doing exactly what I tell you." After finishing what Tilly told her to do, she stopped at Philippe's house where she dropped off her bags. Then they waited for their brother Charles-Henri to arrive. Tilly insisted that she be accompanied by her two brothers because they were all going to confront her husband Jean together. Then Tilly sent her an email detailing exactly what she had to say to Jean and even the time when to do so, 3:30 p.m. At 3:30 p.m. on the dot, the trio drove back to Ghislaine's house. There they found Jean Marchand. Following the instructions that Tilly had emailed to her, Ghislaine threw the glove and the bouquet of flowers at her husband's feet. Then she recited the following. "Jean, here are the evil signs of your network that I have found in our garden in Fontenay. You have half an hour to pack up and leave this house. I know that you are part of a sect and have over 40 mistresses. Go back without turning around and reassure yourself. Uninitiated and weak beings like me, who have no soul and who are just good at being objects, can also have no regrets nor remorse because it's always life that prevails against the non-life of the initiates." Afterward, Jean attempted to reason with her, but to no avail. Then, suddenly, a physical altercation occurred. Then Ghislaine's brothers, Charles-Henri and Philippe, clumsily grabbed at Jean's clothes and started dragging him to the door. After a great deal of struggle, Jean told them that he understood and that he would leave by himself. Following that, he packed his things and walked out the door. Soon, Jean learned that his joint account with Ghislaine had been emptied. A banker told him that a week earlier, Ghislaine had transferred their money and savings to a bank called National Westminster. She had left him penniless and in severe debt once his taxes came in. Following that, he was only able to get by due to a 10-month payment plan he had arranged with his bank and also with the help of his parents and friends. Months after he was banished from the family, Jean left them a voicemail message which made Tilly's claims that he was part of a sect more believable. The message he left went, quote, "You, the family Vidrines, vermin that you are, we are going to see to you. You're on your own, you're isolated, and you're already done for. The bailiffs will soon be there. You're finished." Jean's use of the word "we" only reinforced the theory that he was part of a plot against them. Going forward, Jean would be cut off from his children, his wife, and much of her family for the next 8 years. Even when his mother died of mesenteric ischemia only a month later, all of Jean's phone calls were ignored by his estranged family. Moreover, none of them attended his mother's funeral, not even his children or his wife. Although Ghislaine writes that she loved her mother deeply and was very close to her, Tilly implored her not to attend the funeral because he claimed to have information that it was a trap to take her to a mental hospital. 48 hours after their confrontation with Jean, Tilly instructed Philippe, Bridget, and Ghislaine to sequester themselves inside of her school, which by then had been shut down and abandoned. Tilly told them that since they were no longer paying any rent, they must occupy the building until he aided them in reopening it. Thinking that they would only stay there for a few days and that Tilly was working on a life-saving plan for the school, they squatted there. However, Ghislaine, Philippe, and his partner Bridget ended up staying in the school for the next 4 months. Tilly was the only person they spoke to during this period. He called them a dozen times per day with updates and orders. He ensured them that he had agents on the ground, ready to neutralize any approaching enemy, but he added that they must take extra precautions to stay safe. Tilly only allowed the trio to go out on rare occasions. They lived on a shoestring budget without basics like heat, electricity, and hot water. By December, the repo men arrived. They seized any assets from Ghislaine's school which could be sold to sponge off the debt accumulated from unpaid rent. Once again, Ghislaine was unfazed by this because Tilly insisted that he had everything under control. On the 15th of December, Tilly warned her that Jean's network of enemies was converging in on her and that they had to leave the school immediately. He told them that Jean had hired assassins to kill them. He added that these assassins were Asian. Terrified, they evacuated the school and sped away in Philippe's car. At about 60 kilometers away from Paris, Tilly called and told Ghislaine that Jean had attached an explosive device to Philippe's Mercedes and that it would explode at any minute. He then ordered them to stay calm and abandon the car as soon as possible. In a hurry, they took a train to Montflancan. feeling as though they were refugees after their months of seclusion, and with the power of Jean's network becoming even more threatening.
That's all